laicos, the laity, which you guys are, that you're also cleros, in the function that as members of the church, you are offering worship to God on behalf of the world. What does the priest do? He offers something on behalf of the people. Okay? So the priest offers something on behalf of the people. The people say, they bring the bread, they bring the wine, and the priest offers this to God on behalf of the people. It's the people's offering. But there has to be somebody to lead it. Okay? So it's the bishop. If the bishop can't do it, then he assigns a priest to do it. And then there's a helper, which is called a deacon, and he helps out. Okay? So, this is what we do when we gather internally in the church. That there's some who make the offering, that's called the clergy, but all the people also make the offering with the clergy. So it's not the clergy offer something for the sake of the people, but the people are making the offering, and the priest is leading them in the offering. Okay? But that's just internally as the church functions within itself. But the church also functions on behalf of the whole world. That's why in the liturgy you say on behalf of all mankind. Remember among the first, his beatitude, remember that. And then the choir sings at the hierarchical and all mankind. Okay? So this was the point Father Halka was making, is that everybody is laos, the people of God. And in a certain restricted sense, the ordained clergy is the kleros. But in a broader sense, the laity is also the kleros. Now, this we talked about last week, and we'll see it again here. Okay, let's go to, we're on page 7, okay? Okay, so the first paragraph there. Then, of course, this line introduces lots of prayers. You have the long intercessory prayers at Matins and Vespers, for example, the Tia or Matins that begin, O Lord, save your people and bless your inheritance. Your people is leos, not leikos, not laity. It's leos, ordained and non-ordained. Clergy and laity, if you want, in other words, okay? And bless your inheritance. Well, what is the inheritance? The inheritance is the kleonoremia, the portion of God. In other words, we're asking the Lord to bless the people, His church, and what the people are doing, what they have. And they have the inheritance, the portion of God, that God has entrusted them with, to offer it in behalf of all and for all. Okay? When the chalice and the discourse is raised, you know, we say, thine own of thine own we offer unto thee in behalf of all and for all. Not a good English translation. What's a better English translation?
Jerusalem, that's the one that they use in English.
I know, but it's not the best. Everything in English is not the best. We've come to that conclusion already. In behalf of everyone and for everything. Because we say in behalf of all and for all, what are you thinking generally? You're just thinking of people. But it's not just people. It's everything. What are we offering back to God? We're offering up wine. We're offering up bread. We're offering up water. We're offering up all the blessings we've received. And that's all symbolized by the chalice and the discourse being raised. Because the basic things of life are in that cup and on that plate. Bread and wine. That's food and drink, you see. But to get the food and drink, You need grapes. To get grapes, you need soil. You need growth. You need sun.
You need water.
You need water. To get the grapes, the wine, it requires some work. You know, they don't turn into wine automatically. You understand? So it's for everyone and for everything. So when we gather at the Divine Liturgy, we kind of think that, well, this is for us. Well, it is for us. But it's not only for us. It's for the whole world, you see. And so, you remember where Peter is saying that you're a royal priesthood? He's not talking to the ordained clergy here. Peter is writing to the people. He says you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a sanctified people, God's own chosen ones. What does God's chosen ones mean? It means the portion. Portion, okay? In other words, you're entrusted with this. You're stewards, in other words, okay? That you have to offer. So when the Divine Liturgy is celebrated then in worship, it's not the priest representing the people. It's the priest, the ordained priest, who's part of the laos, working with the laos, or the latos, the laity, offering together. That's why we say, we worship thee, we bless thee. The priest doesn't, the only time the priest says anything individual in his own name is what prayer? Anybody know what prayer? The prayer at the mystical, at the great entrance. No one who is bound by the desires and the pleasures of the flesh, the prayer of St. Basil. It's I. The pronoun there is I. The priest is saying this privately, okay? As a cleansing prayer for himself. But all the other prayers, it's always plural, and it's always we. So it's not that the priest is acting, and we said this before, that you can't have a liturgy without people. A priest cannot celebrate a liturgy if he's just in the church by himself. It's impossible to do that. That you need the people, okay? Or, in the extreme thing, you need at least one person that's not a clergyman. Okay? So if there was another priest there, it's still no good. Because he's a priest. You need laity, you see. Because it's the people.
But if he's part of laos, if the priest, the other priest, let's just say you're another priest, if he's part of laos, then why can't liturgy be served?
Well, because the distinction still has to be made. First of all, you're presuming he's not serving.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, in other words, if he's not serving, but still, he's really not representing the people. He's part of the laos, yes, but he's really not representing the people because of his standing. And even in church, if he was in church and not serving, where would he stand?
On the side, like in the cleros?
On the what? What's the word?
Cleros.
Kleros. See, kleros? Okay, so kleros is not only a term for the ordained clergy, it's a location. The kleros is that one step up in front of the iconostasis. So if clergy are not serving, notice when the bishop comes for Vespers, and he's not serving, where is he seated?
He sits on the side.
Not on the side. He sits on the kleros.
Yeah, he sits on the solea.
No, not the solea. The solea is right in front.
That's the ambo.
No, the ambo is what comes out.
All right, I'm going to get it right one of these days.
This is a badge in Girl
I think the
Scouts.
solea was the whole thing.
No, it's the kleros. It's the kleros. The solea, the ambo, when it says, if you look in the book, it says a prayer before the ambo. Okay?
Right.
In the early church, the solea, which is where you receive communion, right in front there, okay? It was extended into the middle of the church, okay? And the priest would go outside of that, at the end of the envelope, in the middle of the church, and he'd do the final prayer. Notice when the bishop's here, there's that little stand in the center. Well, that's the extension of what was the ambo. So the ambo would come out from the front of the royal doors. It would come to the middle of the church. Okay? And so This was in the early church architecture. So when the deacon came out to read the gospel, he didn't have to go down the step. He just walked out
Like a runway?
like a runway. Like a runway, yeah. He
Red
walked out,
carpet.
and that's what it was. Now, in the fancier churches, and there's a few of them left in Greece, you could see in like, what's that? Where Metaora is, the town there. Tirigala.
Oh, Trigger.
They have the anvil, and there's like 3 steps going up, and there's a platform, and the deacon would be higher so that they could see him and hear him. Okay? But eventually, that edifice was taken away, and the anvil was kind of shortened, you see. So, there's no real anvil anymore in the church, you see. In the Greek churches, they call that whole extended part the soleia. But it's the soleia is not the real term for it. It's the kleros. And this is where, like even in the Greek church, where the bishop's throne is,
Yes.
it's on the kleros. Or you
Yeah,
you guys
right.
would call it soleia, maybe, but it's
No,
not.
it's on the, right, you're right.
It's the kleros. So
Right.
that's what the clergy would say. So if there's a priest that's not serving, he doesn't belong out in the naxos, the vestibule. He doesn't belong in the church proper. He's supposed to stand on the kleros.
How come we have priests that come and then they don't, like, stand where they're supposed to stand?
Because there's not enough room on the kleros.
Yeah, our cliffs is really small.
Where they're going to stand? It's so small.
Yeah.
But if you notice, if you pay close attention, which probably a lot of people aren't, if you ever notice during the prayers after a service, and the deacon comes out, you never see Deacon Paul stand in the middle of the church.
Yeah, he always stands
He
there.
stands on the kleros till the service is over, like during the first hour after vigil, or post-communion prayers. If the prayers aren't done yet, he will come to the main part of the church. He'll stand on the kleros, because that's where he belongs. He knows that, you see. Okay, so kleros means a place where the ordained stand, okay? Those that are non-ordained, they have the privilege of going upon the kleros to receive communion, okay? They come up in front of the royal door. Now, a lot of times, to make it easy for people, the bishop or the priest will come to the end so they don't have to take the step up. But you're depriving the laity of that privilege of coming up. So, sometimes the priests don't think that's important. But the priest doesn't have a right to take away that privilege that's given to you, as far as I'm concerned. So we come to the edge for some older people, although even then I kind of wonder when they go up 4 steps in their home every day, back and forth, and they're going up the second step.
But they have a railing.
Well,
They have a system.
Hey, the usher thing, yeah.
well, all right, but it's only 1 step. I mean,
Yeah.
but it could be problematic for some people. We understand that. So, but I mean, I've been to people's homes where
They have more steps than.
more steps than that. Okay, but yes. So you were saying.
I wasn't saying that.
Then, okay, so you're saying that kleros is designed for the clergy who aren't serving. Then why do some people use their kleros for their choir? Or is it not?
They don't go up that far. They might be.
No, you
Well,
still.
Like in the cathedral in New York City, there are choirs to the side. Is that still considered the kleros, or is
I
it like
don't know exactly where they have it in New
it's
York
like
City.
all the way
But
to the
it
right?
would be not where the Jordanville has that too, and it's, you have to go up steps to go there on the kleros. Traditionally the choirs would not be in the back of the church; they'd be in the front of the church.
Right.
But not necessarily on the kleros.
So maybe it's like it's all the way to the side, but it's not necessarily on the kleros anymore. It's like right next to
One
it.
time when I went to Jordanville, they explained to me that because the choir was at one time all monastic, and they were ordained monastics, they used to stand on the kleros.
Oh,
But don't forget.
But they modified that.
They didn't have choirs. That's a modern concept. They had cantors.
Well, I mean, for example,
Which
if you
stood
go
up.
to St. Nectarius Monastery, I haven't been in their new church, so I don't know. But when they had the old church, if you remember, they had the cantors up front, but they weren't on the cleros.
No,
they
they're on the side.
They were on the side,
Yeah.
below
And
the
I think the
cleros.
keys are more to the right.
Yeah,
They are more to the right. Like it is right. So it's not like they're in front of the icon on the right hand of the iconostasy
They
there.
didn't
Right
have
there.
choirs back then.
Yeah. But they do have cleros, where choirs are on the cleros, that's for sure. But it's again, you have to remember the whole architecture thing. We explained that you have the exonarch. Nothing is like what it.
Ideal.
It should be.
In
Yeah.
Russian Orthodox Church, you see this all the time.
See what?
In Russian Orthodox Church,
See what though?
on cleros, there is small, especially in villages, small towns, always the reader.
Oh, you mean the choir or whoever's?
You can't go just go on the choir like someone will walk on our choir. It's only designated people, and they always stand on the right or on the left, depends on the church.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that far close. I mean,
No, it's the same, because I pay attention to.
No, I don't know. When I was in Alaska, they had the choir. They had no choir lofts except St. Nick, the cathedral in Kodiak, and the one. Matter of fact, Kodiak they did away with it under one of their bishops, so there's not even a choir loft anymore. But they would go in front, but it wasn't on the kleros. It was below. So there were 3 steps to go up yet to the
Understood
to the kleros.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't want to spend the whole time on architecture. That's not
Just wondering.
the point here. But again, the idea of inheritance. So it says, "Save, O Lord, save thy people and bless thy inheritance." We're saying, "Save, O Lord, save thy people, the laos, all the people ordained and unordained." And then it says, "Thine inheritance," and that means the function of the laos, all the people ordained and unordained, as acting as kleros. So laos here, your people, means not laity, it means laos. Clergy, ordained and non-ordained. Inheritance means the kleros. It means, again, the whole church acting in a priestly manner. Okay, we'll read on that so it becomes clearer. Okay. Preserve the Orthodox Christians, send down thy rich mercies through the prayers and intercessions of all Holy Lady Theotokos, ever Virgin Mary, by the might of the precious cross, by the protection of the holy angels, by the intercessions of the holy and laudable apostles, holy victorious martyrs, holy and God-bearing fathers, fathers and mothers. And then you have, O Lord, save your people and bless your inheritance. Well, that shows that the people and the inheritance are one and the same reality. The laos is the kleros. That's the point. Okay? So, if somebody is to say, "Are you clergy?" You can say, "Yes, I'm clergy." You say, "No, you're not ordained." "That's right, I'm not ordained, but I'm still clergy." How can you be clergy? Because you're part of the kleros. You're God's portion. In other words, the function of the royal priesthood of the faithful in worship is to offer, together with the ordained priest, everything for the benefit of the world. Okay? What we want to see now, and what we're trying to say very simply, is that when you take the church as a whole, whether it's the Chal Israel, the Assembly of God in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel, Judah, Israel where God is known, and so on, and certainly for Christians we believe it's the Christian church, which is the Israel of God in the Messiah, that the church as a whole community is laos. Again, laos means people, not laity. Everyone in it are the people of God, including the ordained members. Everyone belongs to the people. Okay? This radical distinction we see in B between clergy and laity, we'll get to that. It's a radical distinction, and it does damage not only in worship, but also in administration and other ministries in the church in general. The modern understanding is that the clergy kind of rules and the lay people, pray, pay, and obey. And we're talking about the Orthodox kind of church here. But the role of the laity has been greatly reduced by overarching clericalism and by interference of worldly concepts going into the church. So in the imperial models, if you want, Byzantium and Russia, the laity, had no kind of part really. It's, I mean, for example, one fast example, a bishop, okay? If you're in the Church of Greece or Constantinople, probably some other churches, the bishops elect their other bishops. They'll nominate. So they'll have a synod meeting, and they'll say, Archimandrite so-and-so, we're going to nominate him to be bishop of so-and-so. All those in favor? All right, you're nominated. Okay, so you become, and then the others say, Axios, Axios, this and that. So then they bring them to the church for the consecration. Okay, because it has to be done with the laos, all the people. And the bishop says, Father Joseph, Axios, Axios. And then the people are instructed, Axios, Axios, Axios. Well, they had no say-so in that. In the early church, a bishop was nominated from the diocese, from the people. Okay, like St. Ambrose of Milan. Okay? In other words, the bishops didn't choose bishops, the people chose their bishops. This was the early church model. So if they needed a bishop, he was taken from the ranks. And you could read this in St. Gregory of Tours, how the bishops were made, even in Gaul, in Italy. This was the model as such. The people, for example, in District 6, St. Ambrose of Milan, he was a governor, a secular governor in Milan, but he was known for his piety. And when the other bishop died, the people wanted Ambrose. And they shouted, Ambrose, Ambrose. They wanted Ambrose. And the ordained clergy said, okay, Ambrose will obey. And so now, again, for example, when Archbishop Michael was chosen bishop, the diocese selected him. Okay? The diocese had an assembly of laos, ordained clergy, non-ordained clergy. They all met together. Okay? So they represented the laity, right? And they nominated candidates. Okay? There were recommendation of candidates that were given, and you could nominate anybody you want. So, there were 3 narrowed down by a committee, which was lay people and clergy, because otherwise you're going to have dozens and dozens, So it was narrowed down, but you could have, at the last minute, you could write any name you wanted as bishop. Okay? And so they chose Michael. Okay? This was the consensus of the clergy and laity of the Diocese of New York, New Jersey, meeting and asking for inspiration by the Holy Spirit. Okay, and then that name was given to the Holy Synod. And the Holy Synod confirmed it. They didn't have to confirm it, by the way. They could say no. But if they didn't confirm it, they'd have to give a reason why that they didn't choose him.
So the people and clergy alike had a say in Bishop Michael's
in our Orthodox
nomination.
Church, in our Orthodox Church in America, yes.
Now, why isn't the same for a metropolitan?
In the other, one second. In the other churches throughout the world, the laity have no say so in that. They just come and they'll be told that they have a new bishop, selected by other bishops. And again, they present the person in church, and then they expect the people to say, Axios, Axios, he's worthy. And they don't even know who the person is or something. He's kind of given them.
Does the same guideline apply to nationally?
Well, that's Rebecca's question. In the national church, it's kind of different. The national church, it's again, you have all the clergy and the laity. When Metropolitan Tikhon was elected, by the way, he wasn't the number 1 candidate. The number 1 candidate was Archbishop Michael. The people wanted Michael. He was number 1, not Tikhon. Tikhon was runner-up. Okay? But you have to have a certain number, like if it's 2/3 vote or something, then they have to take the vote. But it wasn't 2/3, so it was less. So on the second ballot, it's kind of narrowed down. On the first ballot, people put everybody. Probably Christopher Callan had a vote.
Oh boy.
Because everybody knows the first vote doesn't mean anything for metropolitan. So you'll have like 24 names of people because they know it means nothing. It's the two highest numbers that will go to the second ballot. Okay, so
then technically the people do have a say for the metropolitan. It's not.
well,
It's like the first ballot and then the second one.
They do, but yeah, it's narrowed down. Okay, but on the second ballot of the two names, the bishops make the decision. Okay, so.
So that's when they all
Michael
that
was
all-
left aside. They took Tikon. Job was left aside. They took Herman. Dimitri was left
Yes,
aside.
that was a
They
big one.
took
That was a big
Theodosius.
one, yes.
Oh boy.
Vladimir was left aside. They took Irene. So the only one that really got in by popular vote of the laity and the bishops was Jonah. And he lasted for a year.
Love
Okay.
Jonah.
So, yeah, so you do vote for the metropolitan if you want, but it's really the bishops that make the final kind of decision on that. It's the same thing, by the way, they did that from Patriarch, since it's St. Tikhon's Day, Patriarch St. Tikhon. You know, when he was voted in, he was number 3 on the list. He only had like 32 votes or something, and the Metropolitan Anthony Kotobovitsky had 107 votes. And there was a Metropolitan Arseny that had 60-something. Okay, so Tikhon was way down. Okay?
Now, can they say no?
But instead of taking a second ballot, what they decided to do was to take the 3 names, fold it in a piece of paper, put it in a chalice, and have an old monk come
I remember that.
and by what they call sacred lot. And this is what, if you remember who was in the, who replaced Matthias, right? They took it by lot, okay? He wasn't the only candidate. And so they took the name and he put his, and Tikhon. So this was, so in other words, instead of the bishops deciding, for example, in Greece, when the archbishop was elected there, they had like 5 or 6 ballots, and it's all published. On the first ballot, so-and-so got this and that, and all the numbers are given there, and it goes on and on and on. And then there's like, some kind of talk in between. Well, why don't we go for it becomes like, But if you really wanted to have the Holy Spirit work, then take the first 3 highest, put it in a chalice, and have some nun or some person take it out and read it, and say it's the Holy Spirit that kind of chooses the person. Okay, the only reason I bring all this up is why. I don't remember why. But I'm saying that the people aren't really involved. The laity are not involved as they traditionally were in the church, especially in terms of administration, in terms of charismatic teachings and everything else that need to be done there. And even in terms of the service, in the liturgy, choirs have replaced the people, professional choirs and things like this. It's,
Well, that because the bishop he's the head of the church, right? And what they say that in Greece too, that the Holy Athens speaks or whatever, they won't use the name of the hierarch. They use the name of his seat, his see. Isn't that part of the deal there too? Because again, the bishop he's part of the people. So again, a bishop is usually consecrated for a people, a church.
A bishop must be the same thing. A priest. A priest must be also a deacon. Even lower, even a reader, a subdeacon, deacon, priest, bishop, when they are ordained, they have to be ordained and linked to a particular church. You can't be a bishop at large.
Which also makes you be accountable too, because you're part of that community, and that community, if there's you're accountable to that community, so you can't, so there's canons against sending presbyters and bishops around to get them out of trouble and hot water and all that. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of moving priests around and everything, it's, in the best of tradition, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Same thing with bishops. You know, how does it, you know, the canons say a bishop, if you're a bishop of a diocese, you cannot be transferred to another diocese. Okay, so then how do you get a bishop that, like Tikhon, he was bishop Eastern Pennsylvania. Okay, then how is he now Bishop of Washington? How could he be elected metropolitan when he was a ruling bishop and you're not allowed to transfer to another diocese? Well, they resigned. They resigned. So they're resigned and they're taken out of retirement, if you want, and they're given a new diocese. But again, you have to remember that this took place. I mean, even Saint Nectarius, he was in Paphos in Egypt, and then in Greece. Saint Dionysius is on Kythos. He was bishop of Egna for a while. So a lot of the saints. Saint Tikhon, he was bishop in America. He was made bishop in America, and then he went to Vilna, and he went to Lublin. Then he went to Moscow. So he was bishop in Yaroslav. He was bishop in 4 different places.
But maybe there was a need.
Well, that's what the church says. There's a need.
Yeah.
Economics.
Because
Not
I know.
economics, but
economy.
Economy, yeah. But even with Saint Nectarius and Saint Dionysius, there was a need for them to be there because there was no organization, if you want to put it in those terms. He really needed to draw the people to the church.
Well, yeah, see, this is where you come in the economia, because the strictness of the canons has to balance the pastoral needs of the local community as such. You see, so, and it's up to the other bishops to kind of do this. All I'm trying to say is that the church is still top-heavy in clericalism, okay? And the laity are diminished in the roles that they could and should play. And when they are playing the roles, I mean playing the good way, I don't mean but doing the things. So a lot of times it's not by blessing, it's by election. You know, I'm going to run for president of the church. I want you to, so in other words, it's a kind of democratic, kind of secular kind of thing. That people assume areas of responsibility, and sometimes and that's why the bishops always insist that when people are elected at any assembly or council or something, even if it's 100% vote for a person, it doesn't mean that because the people elected that person, that they're going to be a council member. That the priest has to give his recommendation to the bishop. And there have been times where somebody was elected and I told them, I said, I think you should withdraw your, because I can't recommend you. And, I tell them the reasons why. So the bishop, when a council is elected, for example, I write a letter to the bishop with all the names. They say, Vladika, these people were elected, they seem responsible, I give my support for them. I recommend that, you consider them for a blessing. And it's only when the bishop sends that letter that you could take office. With no blessing from the bishop, you can't be a council member. I mean, everything's, you understand? But anyway, that's another issue, and that's for a future talk about the lay ministries its contemporary problems and what we could and should do about it. But that's not really the subject here. The subject here is really just worship. Okay, so we have to go quickly on here. But then it would be the understanding that the entire people, let's speak of the Christian church, is God's kleronomia, God's heritage, God's portion, God's kleros, God's part, God's possession, within all of the families and all of the peoples of the earth. The important thing about the Christian church is that it's not simply made up of Jews. It is made up of anybody, any human being of any nation on earth that is baptized into Christ, has faith in Jesus as the Lord, is sealed by the gift of the Holy Spirit, and therefore a member of the body of the people of the chosen portion. Okay, chosen portion. That's chosen portion. Another name is kleros. Okay? Then, therefore, worships in spirit and truth. At the divine liturgy, which is a common act of the community, the whole church, this assembly, and therefore is the common act of all God's people, all of God's kleros, all of God's clergy. So this is the important line here. So that in that sense, the entire church is people and clergy. Just like the entire Israel was the people and the inheritance, the selected portion. Okay? Now, we have to add, however, that in the New Testament church, speaking now about the church, and this is identical to what we've already spoken about in the Old Testament, within the church, though, you still have a portion within the portion, so to speak, and these are the clergy. Okay? So you understand, everybody is kleros, but then there are some that are more particularly kleros, ordained. But kleros, in the general sense, is ordained and not ordained, as the portion that God gives the church to act in worship on behalf of the whole world. You have to remember that the liturgy isn't just for those there Sunday. It's for all mankind. It's for the whole world. It's a recapitulation of everything that's of salvific history. And we say that. Remember the cross, the tomb, the resurrection on the third day. All those things are brought there. Okay, within the church, though, you have a portion within this portion, so to speak, that these are the clergy. In other words, the whole people are God's portion. Okay? But then within the people, you have those chosen from among the people. From among the people to receive a laying on of hands. We might even say a second laying on of hands after the baptismal one, the Pentecostal one, the one that's at chrismation. And this is to be a deacon, a minister, to be a priest, to be a bishop, to be an ordained person. So, you have an ordination of some of the laos, some of the people, to serve as leaders of the people. And these people have come to be called today clergy. The rest of the people have come to be called today laity. But again, in terms of worship, it's all the people worshiping together with the, quote, clergy leading but not representing the people. The clergy doesn't represent the people. The people are making themselves present. And the priest is leading them, but not represent. If I represent you, that means the investment is in me to represent you. You don't have to be there even. Okay? But the priest never represents. The priest makes present the reality of the worship, but he doesn't represent. We even have a line which we'll comment on later in the Great Litany, where it says, "For all the clergy and the people. For this house and for those who enter, let us pray to the Lord. All the clergy and the people, let us pray to the Lord." But in some sense, it's an accurate sentence if by clergy you mean the ordained, and by the people you mean the non-ordained. Nevertheless, we say that, for the clergy and the people. So they're making that distinction, but it probably would have been better to say for all the people. Nevertheless, we have to always remember that when we say the people, it doesn't mean the non-ordained. The people theologically, scripturally mean all of the people. within which the bishops, the presbyters, the deacons, and all the clergy are all equally members of the people.
So how much of that's all tied up with the sacramental? Because again, like through baptism and chrismation, we all become a new creation. We all become sons of God. We all
Sons,
become
prophets, kings, priests.
and all put on Christ. So I mean, so to like lessen, we've all been lifted up in that, and again taken up in Christ. So again,
Yes, everyone's in Christ. The patriarch's in Christ, and the little baby's in Christ. The new baptized baby. They're both sons of God, they're both slaves, they're both, and they have particular, the patriarch could have a particular liturgical ministry and sacramental leadership in the church, but it's in the church, for the church, it's not above the church.
but they've each received Christ fully.
Every receives Christ fully.
So there's no portion of Christ is given to one more than another.
Right. Sometimes we in
That's how
modern
we
thinking, we
think.
might think that.
Yeah.
That, well, if he's a patriarch, he has more grace.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone receives at baptism, chrismation, what is needful for them, the fullness of the grace. Now, when there's a particular ministry, when there's a particular event that takes place, then that grace is, there's two ways of looking at it. One is, and this is, again, a little difficult to understand. One model, and Father Hutto was talking about this, he says that one understanding is this, is that when you're baptized and chrismated, you receive the plenitude of all the fullness of grace. Nothing is lacking. Okay? And when you receive a more particular sacramental grace, it's not that something is added, but rather what is within is wells up to what the particular ministry and need is in the context.
Charisma, or whatever, is that the way to look at it?
Right, the charisma, the grace, it kind of, bubbles up, that it becomes defined. Okay? But it's nothing that's kind of added. The other model is that there's something added. Okay? So there's something added. In other words, all right, you have the grace, you have the plenitude of everything, and then something by ordination or something, or marriage, or whatever the situation is, something is added that wasn't there before. Okay? Well, so when we say send down the Holy Spirit upon us, a new outpourings, is it something that's new that is given to us? Or is it a new way of experiencing what has been given to us that reveals and manifests itself in ways that was hidden and, if you want, in storage that was not utilized before? I think the first model is more correct than the second model. You see. And in this we differ, for example, but again, the language, we say, the grace of the Holy Spirit be with you. Well, if you're already alive in the Holy Spirit, isn't the grace of the Holy Spirit with you? Or are you asking for something more? Mm. Or are you asking that you're able to discern what has been given you?
From glory to glory.
From glory to glory, and it begins to overflow, but it's yours already. In other words, Paul writes that, he says, you've already inherited the kingdom of God, that you've already received everything, that there is nothing that is lacking. So why are we always praying then for something more? We're asking for more outpourings of the Holy Spirit. We're saying, but what it is, it's not so much we're asking for more, but we're asking to discern and to utilize what the Holy Spirit is making manifest in us according to the need, to the need of each person. Okay? So when you're married, are you getting a special grace? Well, you could say so, but again, it's the grace of the fullness of God that's already within you, that the Lord is portioning in a certain way, a certain portion, that this is what is needful now in your life in this context, you see. Just as an aside, you know, in the Orthodox Church, we don't have indelible grace. Like in the Catholic Church, if you're a priest forever. And there's an indelible mark that's put upon your soul, that the grace is given to you, and even if you're defrocked or something, you're still indelible mark. I mean, I don't know where they get that crazy idea, but okay. All right, let's go on, and maybe some of these things will be clear here. The conclusion is that, in some sense, in which the entire church as a whole church is both people and inheritance, clergy. And the whole church functions as a clergy. Okay, that's number D there. The whole church functions as clergy, the circle there. The whole church functions as clergy, the prophetic people, the priestly people, the royal priesthood, for the sake of all nations and all the peoples of the earth. Okay? So, the non-ordained function as clergy in this sense. Okay? So that when the Christian church worships, it offers itself and sacrifice to God with Christ in the Eucharist sacrifice, and the offering which is always on behalf of all and for all. It's an offering for the whole of creation. It's an offering for all the humanity of the earth. The church intercedes for all the peoples of the earth, including those that are not its members, the non-baptized. Even prays for the enemies. It prays for those who persecute them. And the offering of Christ is for the salvation of the whole world. So the divine liturgy is also a sacrificial offering and a prayer for the sake of the whole world. So, again, as a footnote here, you know, liturgically it names a commemoration, the Proskymedia, it should be Orthodox names, because the discourse represents the church. It doesn't represent the world. There's debate on that. Some people say it represents the world because you're offering up the discourse, and the Christ, the Lamb is there, then you have the saints and the Theotokos, and then you have the living and the dead. So isn't that the whole world that's being offered up? That's one way of seeing it. The other way, the more traditional way, and it's debated back and forth, is that it's not representing the world, but it's representing the church.
Well, isn't the church the people? And aren't the people part of the world?
No, you're in the world but not of the world. The church is special people, chosen nation, holy people, sanctified, royal priesthood. You're separate, you're different. You're in the world but not of the world. Okay? But you pray on behalf of the whole world. So the discourse, in the most traditional understanding, the way I understand it, is that it represents a church. And that's why for the commemorations in the books, we do the names of Orthodox believers. We don't do, but it doesn't mean you don't pray for the non, you know. And unfortunately, there are priests that these days will, you know, you give a name and they don't care if you're Anglican or Unitarian. You just give a name and the priest will mention the name. It's not the best liturgics, if you ask me. But again, people say that, well, you're only praying for Orthodoxy. We're only praying for Orthodox by name, yes. But are we praying for the whole world? Of course we're saying that. We're saying for travelers by land, by sea, by air, the sick and the suffering, captives their salvation, for those that love us, for those that hate us, for the whole world. We're praying for everybody, okay? But by name, we mention the Orthodox, okay? And that's why if you notice in again, sometimes in the great entrance or the prayer of the Ambo, if you read the books, you'll see that it'll say for the people and the civil authorities. But if you notice, I never do civil authorities in the prayer of the Ambo. Why? Because when that prayer was done in Byzantium and in Russia, it was the Orthodox rulers that were mentioned. Okay? Okay? It wasn't.
How does that play into how, you know, patriarchs and metropolitans used? Because those used to be appointed by emperors. The patriarch or metropolitan of Moscow used to head
well, that was interference. That was interference again.
Yeah.
You know, it should be the. I mean, even when Metropolitan Innocent was nominated as Metropolitan of Moscow in 1867, it was confirmed by the Tsar.
Well,
And
just
Tsar Nicholas II, when he had problems with bishops, he'd have them transferred. But again, it's.
Yeah,
Look,
I think the telegram you got really
the
just
idea of this-
points you.
The idea of symphonia, of the double-headed eagle, the church and state working together, sometimes that worked. A lot of times it didn't work because one overstepped the other.
Usually the state.
Usually the state overtook the church.
So that's not an image of the church.
It's not an image of the church, not at all.
It's a secular.
Even patriarchy is not an image of the church.
When Bishop Michael's here and he has the, was it Orleans, is it called? It's a single-headed eagle on that.
Well, that's because it's a diocese.
Yes.
The double-headed eagle is a product of Byzantium, of the symphony of church and state. It's a historical aspect, and there's vestiges of it in Greece and in Cyprus and in Russia these days even, very prominently. But the idea was that, you had an Orthodox ruler, emperor, or czar, and they were chrismated. They were chrismated. So the chrism that you receive when you're baptized, when the czar was coronated, the metropolitan chrismated him. It was considered a sacrament because he was ruling as an anointed ruler, Orthodox ruler. So again, my point is, if you have an Orthodox ruler at the great entrance and the prayer of the Emblem, then you can do what was done in Russia or in Byzantium and mention the name, His Royal Majesty, Tsar, you can do that. But if not, So in English they just put civil authorities, you see. And in some churches you go, they don't even like the president, so they just say civil authorities. In other churches you go, they'll say the president, the governor, the mayor, Congress. I mean, throw in the Supreme Court too if you want. So what do you do when you say civil authorities? You see, for example, the books say the Christ-loving army. In English we're not saying Christ-loving army anymore because
We don't have one.
Okay. Divine liturgy is a sacrificial offering and a prayer for the sake of the whole world. What it means is that the entirety of God's people, the whole church, led by the clergy, are doing this priestly act, of all the people, doing this priestly act as a whole. So we can say that divine liturgy is celebrated by all the people who are there, by all members of the church, by what we call today the clergy and the laity together. Now, on the other hand, we have to say this other truth, and that is that within the people as a whole, the kleronia, the inheritance as a whole, there are some who are ordained. I love an expression I heard Metropolitan Callisto Swear, who said, the way to understand the priesthood and clergy and laity in the Orthodox Church is to say, all of the people are the people of God. All of the people are priests unto God. All of the people are a communion of prophets and priests. All of the people belong to the royal priesthood. All of the people are in the holy nation, all together. So everything which is an act of the church is done by all of the people together. The church is a whole body, and each member has its part. Okay, so all. Okay, now, and here we're doing number C. One, some, all. So, again, all. But then there are some, and then there's one. Okay, now we're getting to the one though. Because we talked about the priesthood of all the people, the laos, the ordained and unordained, that they're making this offering on behalf of the whole world. But you could say that when it comes to the priesthood, all of the people belong to the priesthood, but this priesthood is a priesthood of only one person, and that is Jesus Christ. So in a certain sense, the only real person of God, the only one who really fully actualizes what it means to be God's people, is Jesus Christ himself. He is the only one who was perfectly the Son of God, and the whole of humanity was created to be by grace. He's God's own Son who came into the world, the one teacher, the one prophet, the one high priest, the one king, belonging to God's kingdom. So in a sense, for Christians, there is only one person, one Adam. There's only one prophet, one teacher, one priest, one king, and one Lord, and that's Jesus Christ himself. Only one episcopos, bishop. Only one overseer. Only one presbyteros, elder?
No, presbyter is a priest.
Priest. Only one elder within the community who governs. Only one diaconus, deacon. The only one who really serves. Has diaconia, service ministry of Jesus. So you have to understand, when the laity, all of us get together, and we say this is the people of God. Well, there's people because there's a person. If there wasn't a person, there's no such thing as people without person, right? I mean, isn't people a plural of persons? Right? I mean, there has to be a person. But the one person of the people of God, of the perfect humanity, is Jesus Christ. So when the bishop serves, he makes Christ present. When the priest serves, he makes Christ present. When the deacon serves, he makes Christ present, because Christ is the servant,
So
the
that's-
diaconus.
But that's within the liturgical service, that's within the sacramental act. But then the laos, when the charismated person goes out into the world, is in Walmart, he makes Christ present.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you guys got to start to think of yourselves as priests. You don't think of yourselves as priests. This is the problem. You think of yourselves as...
I didn't know I could. That was very...
So,
So, say if somebody said, hey, we don't have... Oh, you don't have Roman priesthood. Oh, yes and no.
I felt bad.
Well, I wouldn't use the word ordained, because that's not the word you want to use.
No, it doesn't.
But you can say you're part of God's portion. The kleros, use the word kleros, God's portion, okay, as the whole people of God. So when it talks about royal priesthood, the laos includes women, obviously, includes the newborn baby that's baptized.
So when you refer people to come to the priest, like to come see you, you should say come to the ordained priest, because technically then they can come to us.
Well, if you say, but you have to look, in B there we have modern language. You know, if I was to say, I'm busy now, go to Rebecca and she'll give you a blessing, then they say, she can't do it, she's not ordained. But that's incorrect too, because lay people can give blessings. It's a tradition.
What kind of blessings could we give them?
blessings of your children before they go to sleep and stuff?
You make the sign of the cross.
Yeah.
I've seen this in Alaska when people would travel all the time. They wouldn't, well, if they were going far, they'd go to the priest and say, Father, I'll be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, when they said they'd be gone, they'd say, when they'd be back, hopefully. They say, God, and they always say, God willing. They were trained right. They would say, God willing, I'll be back by Dermisha. They didn't say 2 weeks. They gave time by feast days.
It's Alaska.
This is the kind of thinking, you know.
It's a separate world.
But
It's
the
a big
people,
one.
I've seen that. But they would bless the crib of the child, or the child was going to take a boat or go fishing or something. The parent would make the sign of the cross over them.
And they say through the prayers of our Holy Fathers.
Yeah, lay people can give blessings. Just don't start like doing this kind of stuff, because, you know.
So there's only
Unless
one
you're praying.
iconographer also.
But
There's only one iconographer also.
Too,
that's
buddy.
right. Because the perfect image of the Father, the visible image, icon, is the God-man Jesus Christ. Okay. So the idea of one here. So why is that important? Because it means what we're participating in doesn't really belong to us. It belongs to Him. And we're united with Him. Okay? Okay, so Bishop Callistus said, when we look at this reality, we say that there's one, that's Christ, and then there are those that were members of Christ, belong to the body of Christ, and that everyone that is church, so that is all. Okay? So one, all, but then he adds, there are still some. Okay, the some, that's the ordained clergy, if you want. They're Christ, there's the whole church. Then there are some within the church, for the sake of the church, who are members of the church set apart, who become a special portion. Not a greater portion, not above, but different. Okay? A special portion. And these are the clergy who, within the people, again, they're part of the laos, as members of the people, laos, govern the people, preside over the community in every aspect of its life, and certainly preside over the divine liturgy and the worship of the church. They're the ones who stand for. They are the prostamoni. Prostamini. The first in, what does that mean? First in standing or something.
Yes.
These are the ones who say the prayer to which the congregation says amen. They're the ones who say to the people, peace be to you, and everyone says back, and to you, and to your spirit. They are the ones who actually say the words to the prayers, and they are the ones who actually do the sacrificial acts of offering. They are the ones who take the bread, prepare the wine, put it on the altar, lift it up. They're the ones who invoke the Holy Spirit on the gifts. But they do it on behalf of all and for all. First of all, on behalf of all the members of the church and within the church. That's done on behalf of all and for all. Not only the members of the entire human race, but for all of creation. Because the worship of God by God's people is the worship of God by God's people. And that would mean that the people in Christ were Christians who are sealed in the Spirit. That's always an intercession mediation for the whole world. For Christ dies for and saves the whole world, and the Christians worship God on behalf of the whole world. So again, we have to remember that context. When we worship, it's not just we go to church for what I need, what I want, what I'm looking for, my consolation, my comfort, but it's for the whole world. All right, so he says, let's say it again. Okay? The church as a whole is both laity and clergy. The church as a whole are the laos and the kleros, vis-a-vis the rest of humanity. Okay? Then within the church, you have some who are clergy ordained who are exercising this ministry within the church, and that would mean in modern terms together with the lay people, with the people, but never apart from them. So we would never ever say that it's simply the clergy who celebrate the liturgy. We would never say that it's the priest who does the liturgy. The whole community is doing the liturgy, but it's being led by